皆様、これより令和6
Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to now begin the fiscal year 2024 online symposium in the UN on the abduction issue. I'm happy to be serving as the master of ceremony. My name is Kaneko Yuriko. This online symposium is being offered through live streaming in English through the UN web television and in Japanese and Thai language through the official YouTube channel of the headquarters of the abduction issue and through YouTube in Korean language. These are the people who will be up on the stage. This symposium is co-hosted by the United States, Australia, Japan, the ROK government, and the European Union. And on behalf of the Japanese Diet, we will have with us Mr. Furuya Keiji, Chairman of the Committee of Congressional Members to act for the early rescue of Japanese victims abducted by North Korea, the families of abductees of Japan, United States, and Thailand. The panel discussion will feature Professor Nishino Junya of Keio University as the moderator, and listen from the panelists Mr. Evans Revere, former Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of the States of the USA, and Professor Lee Won-den, Professor of Kookmin University, the Republic of Korea. And based in New York, we have the members of the permanent missions of the member states of the United Nations and the members of the UN Secretariat. Those of you participating from New York, thank you for joining us from so early in the morning. In opening the symposium, I would like to call upon Ambassador Yamazaki Kazuyuki, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Permanent Representative of Japan to the UN. Ambassador Yamazaki, please.
His Excellency Hayashi Yoshimasa, His Excellency Furuya Keiji, Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield of the United States, Ambassador Jameslson of Australia, Ambassador Hwan Jungkook of the Republic of Korea, Ambassador Stavros Lambrinis of the European Union, dear speakers and panelists, ladies and gentlemen. I'm deeply honored to co-host this online symposium on the abductions issues at the United Nations, together with the 4 distinguished permanent representatives. Their participation is a testament to the international community's unwavering support for addressing the critical issue and underscores the collective resolve to seek resolution for the victims of abductions. Japan, in close collaboration with our partner countries, has been tirelessly working towards the immediate resolution of this issue on the international stage, including in the United Nations. Today, we will hear the heartfelt testimonies of families from Japan, the United States, and Thailand. We are also joined by distinguished experts on North Korea who will discuss strategies for resolving the abduction issue and its broader significance to the global community. Ladies and gentlemen, the international community has consistently, unitedly demanded the immediate return of all abductees who have remained trapped in North Korea. This demand is echoed in annual adoption of the United Nations General Assembly resolution on the human rights situation in the DPRK, which receives overwhelming support from the UN member states. I would like to mention that last year, Security Council formally addressed the human rights situation in the DPRK for the first time in 6 years. Just 2 weeks ago, the Council once again deliberated on the DPRK's human rights violations and abuses, including the abductions issues and the implications of international peace and security. These actions and discussions highlight the urgent need to continue strengthening the collective will of the international community to resolve the abduction issue. I sincerely hope that today's symposium will reconfirm the gravity of the issue of the abductions, demonstrate the international community stands with the families of the victims who have endured years of pain and suffering, and generate further momentum for us to collaborate towards the immediate resolution of the abduction issues. Thank you.
Ambassador Yamasaki, thank you very much.
続きまして
Next, on behalf of the government of Japan, Mr. Hayashi Yoshimasa, the minister in charge of the abduction issue and the chief cabinet secretary, deliver the keynote remarks. Minister, please.
Good evening, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am Hayashi Yoshimasa, the Chief Cabinet Secretary of Japan. I concurrently hold the post of Minister in charge of the abduction issues. On behalf of the government of Japan, I would like to express my sincere thanks to the United States, Australia, the Republic of Korea, and the European Union for co-hosting today's symposium. I am also grateful for the families of victims participating not only from Japan, but also from the United States and Thailand, as well as panelists who are also here with us. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the United Nations colleagues as well for convening today's symposium, as well as your understanding and cooperation for the immediate resolution of the abduction issues. The government of Japan has identified 17 Japanese citizens as victims of abduction by North Korea. Moreover, there are many other missing people for whom the possibility of abduction by North Korea cannot be ruled out. Since 5 of the abductees returned to Japan in October 2002, any single abductee has not returned to Japan. It is truly regrettable, and we take this fact very seriously. The abduction issue is not something that happened in the past, but it remains an ongoing international challenge which we need to resolve immediately. The abductees are still deprived of their freedom and barred from returning home. In my meetings with the victims' families, I have heard firsthand about their years of sorrow and pain. I have visited the spot in Niigata where the 13-year-old girl, Miss Yokota Megumi, was abducted in 1977. It was a quiet residential area facing the sea over just a street, and it feels quite similar to my hometown, Shimonoseki, which made me painfully aware that something similar might have happened to my 2 now grown-up daughters. The abduction issue is not a mere incident or accident, but a violation of basic human rights which should be protected universally. Furthermore, Japan is not the only country whose own citizens have been abducted by North Korea. Therefore, we believe even more that close cooperation with the international community is crucial toward the resolution of the abduction issue. Prime Minister Kishida has asked the national leaders for their continued understanding and cooperation toward the immediate resolution of the abduction issue on various occasions, including the summit meeting with Australia last November, with the US in April, and with the ROK in May, and at the G7 summit this month, and once again gained their full support. The international community has been showing a strong determination also in the United Nations. The resolution on the situation of human rights in the DPRK, which include reference to the abduction issue, have been adopted at the Human Rights Council 17 times for 17 consecutive years, and at the General Assembly 19 times for 19 consecutive years. Let me take this opportunity to express my appreciation for the understanding and cooperation of the international community. Ladies and gentlemen, Japan's basic position on North Korea is to seek to normalize the relations with North Korea in accordance with the Japan DPRK Pyongyang Declaration of 2002 through comprehensively resolving outstanding issues of concern, such as the abductions, nuclear and missile issues, as well as settlement of our unfortunate past. In particular, with the aging of the abductees and their families, the abduction issue is a humanitarian and time-sensitive issue with no time to spare. In Japan, the sense of urgency is growing ever stronger among the public, not to mention among the families of the victims. Establishing fruitful relations between Japan and North Korea meets the interest of both sides and will greatly contribute to the peace and stability of the regions. However, the longer the current situation drags on, the more difficult it becomes to realize new relations between Japan and North Korea. We must waste no time and boldly change the current situation. Prime Minister Kishida has expressed his intention to pursue high-level talks under his direct supervision toward holding a summit meeting with President Kim Jong-un. It is crucial to build relations that will allow both leaders to hold honest and candid discussions in order for them to address such a difficult challenges as resolution of the outstanding issue of concern between the two. We will continue to call for North Korea to make decisions together with us from a broader perspective, overcoming every obstacle for the peace and stability of the region and international community, as well as for both Japan and North Korea. I strongly hope today's symposium will contribute to increased awareness on the abduction issues and raising momentum in the international community for its immediate resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Hayashi.
各行政国等代表からもご挨拶をいただきます。今回は皆様、事前収録にて
We will receive comments from the co-host. First of all, Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield, Ambassador of the U.S. to the UN.
2 months ago, while I was in Japan, I had the honor of meeting Sakie Yokota. Sakie's daughter, Megumi, was only 13 years old when she was abducted by North Korea on the way home from school. For nearly 50 years, Sakie waited to be reunited with her daughter. All I want, Sakie told me, is to see her while I'm still well. In recent years, Sakie has met Megumi's daughter and granddaughter. And despite so much heartbreak, Sakie has never, ever given up hope. She and her sons are on the front lines of the fight to return abductees like Megumi, to reunite brothers and sisters, sons and daughters with their families, to give those whose loved ones have died the answers and justice they deserve, and to raise the plight of abductees to the world. The Yokota family is joined by activists like Akihiro Arimoto, whose daughter Keiko was abducted while studying English in Europe nearly 40 years ago. Akihiro took the first bullet train from Kobe to meet with me while I was in Japan. I later learned that every year he and his wife Koyoko baked a cake to celebrate their daughter's birthday together. Now even that is impossible. Koyoko passed away in 2020 before she could ever be reunited with her daughter. As I told Akihiro and the Yokota family that day, the United States stands with them, and we will continue to raise abductions at every possible opportunity and call for the immediate resolution of this issue. Of course, not everyone is so committed to diplomacy. Despite attempts at dialogue, the DPRK has responded only with aggression, choosing missile launches over meaningful progress, isolationism over multilateralism. This damaging, dangerous behavior is coupled with horrific human rights abuses. And we know that there are those countries that choose to look the other way or worse, enable these abuses. But just as Akihiro, the Yokotos, And so many other families have continued to fight for reunification and justice, so too will we. We will continue to push the DPRK's human rights violations to the top of Security Council's agenda. We will continue to press the DPRK toward constructive dialogue and the return of these abductees. And we will continue to work with partners to seek out the accountability victims have gone decades without. As Sakie and Akahiro remind us, there isn't a moment to lose. Thank you.
That was Ambassador Thomas Greenfield.
そしてジェーム
Next is the remarks by His Excellency Mr. James Larson, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Australia to the United Nations.
By the abduction of foreign citizens by North Korea and the human rights situation there. It's been 10 years since the 2014 Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights found that violations perpetrated by the North Korean government constituted crimes against humanity. It is deeply concerning that little has changed over that time. Australia is pleased to co-host this event today as an opportunity to continue to raise our concerns about human rights abuses in North Korea. It's important we do not remain silent in the face of such abuse and instead use every opportunity to call out these crimes. Australia regularly raises our concerns about the dire human rights situation in North Korea at international forums, including at the Human Rights Council and UN General Assembly. At the 55th session of the Human Rights Council in April this year, we were pleased to deliver a joint statement on behalf of 53 co-sponsors of the resolution on the situation of human rights in North Korea that supported additional resources to the DPRK Accountability Project to increase its evidence collection and documentation work and pursue pathways for accountability. We reiterate our call on North Korea to engage constructively with UN processes, end torture and prisoner mistreatment, abolish the death penalty, and immediately resolve the abduction issue. Australia is gravely concerned by credible reports that escapees have been forcibly returned to North Korea. Returnees are at risk of being subjected to torture, cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. We urge all member states to reaffirm their commitment to the principle of non-refoulement under international human rights law. Australia is gravely concerned that Russia vetoed the mandate of the 1718 Committee Panel of Experts on North Korea after 14 years of unanimous support. The disbandment of this expert panel has further restricted access to verifiable, evidence-based assessments on the DPRK's economic situation and sanctioned activities, all critical to better understanding the human rights and humanitarian situation faced by the people of North Korea. We call on North Korea to engage Japan on its offer of dialogue to resolve outstanding issues of concern, including abductions. Thank you.
Thank you. This was Ambassador James Larson.
Next, Ambassador Hwang Jung-kook, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Permanent Representative of the RRK to the UN.
As a co-host with Japan, the United States, Australia, and the European Union, I'd like to extend my gratitude to the Japanese government for convening this event. I'd also like to honor the families of the victims of abduction and the forced disappearance by the DPRK from Japan, the Republic of Korea, the US, Thailand, and other countries for their tireless efforts to ensure their loved ones return and are not forgotten. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the landmark UN Commission of Inquiry report on human rights in the DPRK. The report provided exhaustive documentation on the gross and systematic human rights violations in the DPRK, including abduction, denial of repatriation, and the forced disappearance on a large scale and as a matter of state policy. For decades, DPRK's human rights violations have extended beyond its border. Hundreds of South Koreans remain abducted or wrongfully detained in the DPRK even after the Korean War. Prisoners of the Korean War have also yet to return to their families, and Japanese citizens have been taken away from their own hometowns. Much to our dismay, DPRK's denial of its human rights abuses remains categorical. The DPRK regime must immediately return all abductees, detainees, and prisoners of war to their families. Last year at the Camp David Summit, the leaders of the Republic of Korea, Japan, and the US reaffirmed a shared commitment for the immediate resolution of the issues of abductees, detainees, and unrepatriated prisoners of war. This year, we, 3 countries, are seated at the UN Security Council together and are collectively committed to raising awareness of Pyongyang's human rights violations and their impact on international peace and security. The DPRK regime uses human rights abuses as a critical means of governance to achieve its political goals. Its long-standing oppressive system has been the engine for the intensive acceleration in the development of weapons, including nuclear weapons. Under this concerning backdrop, I recall that I spoke on this occasion last year of the significance of the Security Council resuming public meetings to address DPRK human rights situation, including abduction. The public meetings were successfully convened at the Security Council last year and this year again. It is imperative that the Security Council consistently shines a light on the dark human rights situation in the DPRK until the regime is held accountable. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the Republic of Korea government will not waver in its determination to speak up and speak out on DPRK's human rights violations. We will do so in solidarity with the international community, and we will take every opportunity to illuminate this issue so that it won't become a forgotten crisis. In closing, I'd like to stress that the Republic of Korea stands firmly together in solidarity with the families of the victims who have been vigorously fighting for the return of their loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Won Jung-kook.
続きまして、
Next is the remarks by His Excellency Mr. Stavros Lambrinis, Ambassador Extraordinary Plenipotentiary, Head of Delegation of the European Union to the United Nations.
A big thank you to the organizers for the opportunity to co-host today's important event with you. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the Commission of Inquiry, which concluded that there had been widespread, systematic, and gross violations of human rights, and that some of them may amount to crimes against humanity. This marks 10 years in which things have sadly not improved. We have seen continued reports of violations of human rights, the denial of fundamental freedoms, impunity, and the absence of due process and the rule of law. We have seen a continued lack of cooperation between the DPRK and many of the relevant UN human rights mechanisms, especially the Special Rapporteur. We have seen reports about an appalling humanitarian situation resulting mainly from government policies. And we have importantly seen no progress with regard to the international abductions cases or reunions of separated families. Dear friends, the title of today's event reminds us that the abductions require an urgent solution. As each year passes, the victims and their families grow older. There is no time to lose. Innocent people continue to pay a high price, as many family members will give testimony to in our meeting today. The European Union is focused not to allow violations and abuses of human rights in the DPRK to become a forgotten crisis. This is why we present resolutions every year in the General Assembly and the Human Rights Council on the situation of human rights in the DPRK. The resolutions agreed by the international community call on the DPRK to immediately return all abductees. What could justify the inhumanity of not doing so? The DPRK must sincerely listen to the victims and their families. It should address all allegations of enforced disappearances, clarify the fate and whereabouts of all disappeared persons, and provide information to the families. The resolutions also reflect the call of the international community for a resumption of reunions of separated families, as well as concern about the welfare of unrepatriated prisoners of war and their descendants. The EU works with Japan and other partners in ensuring that the urgency of resolving the abductee issue remains at the forefront of international attention. In the framework of our policy of critical engagement of the DPRK, the EU will continue to urge the DPRK to take constructive action to resolve the issue of the international abductions. We stand ready to support interactions between the DPRK and UN human rights bodies and to support new diplomatic initiatives. But until there is progress in resolving the issue, we will continue to use the instruments available to us, notably UN resolutions, to stress the urgency of the matter. Respect for human rights, dear friends, is an essential element in building peace and security. In our view, the Security Council should address the human rights situation in the DPRK, given the implications for peace and security in the region. And to conclude, I wish to assure you that the issue of human rights in the DPRK will remain a priority for the European Union. Thank you very much.
This was Ambassador Mr. Stavros Lambrinidis.
On behalf of the Japanese Parliament, the Diet, we will receive remarks by Mr. Furuya Keiji, Chairman of the Committee of Congressional Members to Act for the Early Rescue of Japanese Victims Abducted by North Korea. Chairman Furuya has been engaged in the abduction issue by North Korea for years and served as the minister in charge of the abduction issue from 2012 to 2014. Chairman Furuya, please go ahead. First, I would like to thank the U.S. government and relevant parties for your cooperation in hosting today's symposium. I am Keiji Furuya, a member of the House of Representatives, serving as chairman of the Committee of Congressional Members to Act for the Early Rescue of Japanese Victims Abducted by North Korea, a non-partisan caucus of over 300 members. On May 11th, we held a national rally on abduction issue, which was attended by Prime Minister Kishida. 21 years have already passed since some of the abductees returned to Japan, yet no new progress has been made. It's extremely regrettable, but North Korea, the country that carried out the abductions, is a dictator-ruled outlier country. The country has completely ignored the warnings of the United Nations and the international community and has devoted itself to the development of missiles and nuclear weapons with no regard for lives and safety of its people. As a result, the economic and food situation in North Korea continues to deteriorate. This is evident in the successive closure of overseas diplomatic missions and the inhumane purges being carried out in the country. Further, DPRK and Russia are tightly bound. Recently, President Putin visited North Korea for the first time in 24 years and held a summit meeting. I am outraged by the sheer fact that there was a meeting, let alone its substance, which was to conclude a strategic partnership treaty, strengthen military ties, and provide arms to the DPRK, in flagrant violation of UN resolutions. Russia is probably receiving labor in return for the provision of weapons and is giving food in return for the provision of weapons. The reality is that North Korea is single-mindedly devoted to the idea that if it can put its nuclear weapons and missiles to practical use, it will be able to compete on equal terms with the United States, a major power. Abductions are not just a problem for Japan. Citizens of 14 countries around the world have been victims. This includes Mr. David Sneden of the United States, whose case was featured in the resolution adopted by both the U.S. House and Senate. Even for the people of the United States, abduction is not a distant Asian problem, but one in which your own citizens may become victims. Later today, Mr. James Sneden, David's elder brother, will make an appeal. Abduction is terrorism, an ultimate violation of human rights, where a nation exploits its own citizens at will. The people of the U.S. pursue justice by even calling on the government to mobilize its forces if an American citizen is abducted. In May, the executives of the Committee of Congressional Members to Rescue Japan victims abducted by North Korea visited Washington, D.C. with representatives of the Association of Families and had rigorous discussions with influential members of the House and Senate, State Department officials, and others on the U.S.-Japan cooperation to solve the issue of abductions. Senior State Department officials, including the Undersecretary of State, Assistant Secretary of State, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, all sat in the meeting with us. And when we met with Ms. Rapp Hooper, Senior Director of the NSC and Special Assistant to the President, she said, "I am a mother of 2 children and I understand painfully how inhumane abductions are. The U.S. government wants to cooperate thoroughly." Such comments gave me the confidence over the strength of the U.S.-Japan partnership as we strive to solve the abduction issue. At the recent G7 summit, statement that included harsh condemnation of North Korea and Russia was adopted. Even if DPRK and Russia strengthen their partnership, there is a limit to what they can do as long as there is a tight net at the global level. China, on the other hand, will most likely maintain their position of not letting the DPRK thrive, but not killing it either, given the reality that North Korea is developing nuclear weapons. In January, President Kim sent a sympathy message addressed to His Excellency Prime Minister Kishida in response to the earthquake in Noto Peninsula, which was unusual of him. Since then, he has kept his usual bullish attitude, but this could be a sign of some change. Japan must use all possible channels to analyze the true meaning of the message and make Kim Jong-un understand that resolving the abduction issue will bring brighter future for North Korea. Prime Minister Kishida stated, "The abduction issue is with a time constraint and cannot let our mindfulness dwindle for even a moment. We will advance high-level discussions under my direct initiative to realize a summit meeting with Chairman Kim Jong-un. Encouraged by strong partnership with the United States and other countries around the world, as the chairman of the committee, I hope to work even harder." Thank you very much, Chairman Furuya.
移りたいと思います。
Next will be the direct voices of appeal plea from the families of the abductees and missing persons. We have family members from Japan, the United States, and Thailand. First, we will invite the younger brother of Miss Yokota Megumi and the representative of the Association of Families of Japanese Kidnapped by North Korea, Mr. Yokota Takuya. Miss Yokota Megumi was abducted in 1977 at the age of 13 by North Korea in Niigata City of Japan. Mr. Yokota. Good evening, good morning to everyone. I am Yokota Takuya, representative of the Association of Families. Today, I would like to express my gratitude for the united message sent to North Korea through the online UN Symposium on the abductions issue co-hosted by Japan, the United States, Australia, South Korea, and the EU, calling for the immediate release of all abduction victims. We are grateful for the efforts to take united action to rescue the 25 million innocent North Korean citizens who are living day by day under severe food shortages in dire and fragile medical environment and deprived of all freedoms, freedom of speech, freedom of movement, and freedom of thought. We also appreciate your efforts to listen to the voiceless voice and to bring back all victims abducted across multiple countries. While many people cannot have a decent meal, the North Korean authorities are preoccupied with nuclear development and repeated ballistic missile launches and continuing military-first politics at the expense of human rights. Seeing Kim Joo-ae dressed in luxury accompanying her father, Chairman Kim Jong-un, amidst many suffering North Korean citizens who cannot even dream of the soup with meat and white rice, the goal advocated by 3 generations of their leaders, I simply wonder if this stark contrast could be accepted as normal. From the windows of the houses where these privileged classes live, can they not see the suffering people? When moving by car, how can they turn a blind eye to the despair on the faces of people outside who are suffering from fear and unable to even imagine a bright future? The reality is the condemnation by the international community against the mastermind of human rights violation. How does Kim Joo accept this reality? Should not Chairman Kim Jong-un be someone to be proud of, both as a national leader and as a father? The Association of Families of Victims and the Rescue Association have formulated a new action plan. It states, if all abduction victims are repatriated collectively while the parent generation is still alive, we will not oppose Japan providing humanitarian aid and lifting unilateral sanctions. The only surviving members of the parent generation of the association is Mr. Arimoto Akihiro, 95 years old, and the father of Keiko Arimoto, and Mrs. Yokota Sakie, 88, the mother of Megumi Yokota. We strongly seek the reunion of the victims with their families in Japan while the parent generation is still alive. It is an issue with a time limit. In the unfortunate event that reunions cannot be realized while the parent generation is alive, we will shift our focus back to strengthening sanctions and request Japanese government to implement new unilateral sanctions against North Korea. We will also strongly oppose the normalization of diplomatic relations between Japan and North Korea. Demand is the immediate collective return of all abduction victims. We do not seek partial solution or phased solutions. We do not demand establishment of an investigation committee or joint office between the two countries. We must not fall into North Korea's tactics of buying time and concluding the matter. The North Korean authorities have strict surveillance and know who, when, where, and what all the abduction victims are doing. The whereabouts of the abductees are not unknown. I hope that the Japanese government and other countries will negotiate strongly with North Korea without overlooking these points. The international community must never accept unilateral changes to the status quo by violence. In Japan, North Korea agents invaded a sovereign state 46 years ago and have continued hostage diplomacy by abducting an innocent 13-year-old girl. I declare loudly, North Korea, give my big sister back, Yokota Megumi, and release all abduction victims immediately. Without the resolution of the abduction issue, there will be no bright future for the two countries. I would like to see Chairman Kim Jong-un make a courageous decision to resolve the despicable human rights violation of abduction perpetrated by the reign of his predecessor by himself in order to secure a bright future. I hope he will make a decision to give his daughter, Kim Joo a hopeful future. To the countries co-hosting today's symposium, please reaffirm your unity to never ease sanctions unless North Korea resolves the abduction issue. For all other courageous people hoping for reunions with their families and siblings, never give up and continue fighting with words as your weapon. I will continue to raise my voice at the forefront. Let us surely achieve victory. I thank all of you for your support. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Yokota.
Next, we will hear from Mr. Isuka Koichiro, who is the eldest son of Taguchi Yaeko-san and Secretary General of the Association of Families of Japanese Kidnapped by North Korea. Ms. Taguchi Yaeko was abducted by North Korea when she was 22 in 1978. Please go ahead, Mr. Isuka. Thank you very much for joining us today at the online symposium. I am Isuka Koichiro, Secretary General of the Association of Families. My mother, Yaeko Taguchi, suddenly disappeared on June 29, 46 years ago, leaving me when I was 1 year old and my 3-year-old sister. At the time, people around her had great doubts about her leaving her young children behind and disappearing. Her whereabouts were unknown for 24 years until they were discovered during a summit meeting between North Korea and Japan in September 2002. North Korea admitted that it had abducted her and explained to the Japanese government that she had died in a car accident in North Korea in 1987. When I heard the news, I was depressed, thinking that I had lost my mother forever without knowing her voice or figure. I could only imagine how she must have felt when she was forced to leave her 2 young children, unable to watch them grow up, hold them close, laugh with her family, and share her joys with them. But to live in North Korea for 24 years, shedding tears for her children. However, the truth has since turned out to be different. The report by North Korea, Yaiko Taguchi deceased, was completely baseless. The death certificate presented by North Korea in 2002 was a fabrication, and the traffic accident report newly presented by North Korea in 2004 as a result of Japan's pursuit did not even contain the name of her in Korean, Lee Eun-hui. Since then, there has been no clear information from North Korea regarding her survival. There are 17 cases of abduction officially recognized by the Japanese government, including my mother, Yaiko. 5 returned in 2002, but even after 20 years, 12 remain unrepatriated. Regarding these 12 people, the North Korean side asserts that 8 have died and 4 never entered in the country. However, their explanation on all of these cases are full of contradictions, and there is no evidence to back their assertion. Abduction by North Korea is Many of the abductions occurred in the 70s and 80s. Close to 50 years have passed. Abductees and families are aging. We can't see their faces, but the average age of officially recognized Japanese abductees is now as old as 74.5 years. There are several family members who have passed away without being reunited. Elder brother of Yaiko and my adopted father, Isuka Shigeo, the previous representative of Association of Families, is one of them. Unless the abductees can be united while the families are alive, there could be no true resolution of the problem. If more families are eternally separated with the abductees due to death, our outrage will surface, and we will never forgive North Korea and countries and people who support the country. But at the same time, we are also ready to counter North Korea objectively based on reason before we become overwhelmed with emotions. We, the Association of Families, came up with a new policy in our campaign. If the immediate collective return of all abductees is realized while the families in our parents' generation are still alive, we will not object to humanitarian assistance nor to the lifting of unilateral sanctions by Japan. The sanctions that we say may be lifted are limited to those imposed unilaterally and independently by the government of Japan. So UN sanctions to which Japan is participating will remain. Unless members of our association of our parents' generation are reunited with the abductees who return to Japan and are able to hug them tight, Japan will never provide humanitarian assistance and will not lift unilateral sanctions. Should more unfortunate events occur in our parents' generation before the return of their loved ones, there will be no humanitarian assistance, no lifting of sanctions, but rather call to strengthen Japan's unilateral sanctions. In the broader picture, there is the nuclear and missile issue of North Korea. However, they should be separated from the abduction issue. Abduction is an issue over life, and life is finite. Further, we don't need actions by North Korea just to buy time, like setting up a fictitious liaison office or face negotiation to bring back a few abductees at a time. We have no time to lose. Activities to increase pressure on North Korea is also necessary. Without pressure, there could not be any effective dialogue. Specifically, setting up a new panel to replace the panel of experts whose mandate expired in April, updating the COI report, which is now 10 years old, or partnership through radio broadcasting could be contemplated. Lastly, while we family members face the unprecedented need to come up with a bold decision soon through thoroughly studying what should be done to save the abductees at the earliest possible timing as we suffer between emotions and reason, North Korea also is faced with a similar situation. North Korea must take a decision to immediately and collectively return all abductees while victims are alive. If reunification with family is not realized, Japan will never forgive North Korea. This is the final chance. North Korea and Chairman Kim Jong-un should capture this final opportunity to make a courageous decision to lead the country towards prosperity and a constructive future. Lastly, I pray that not only the Japanese but all abductees from around the world are able to return home and reunite with their families. I plead for your support so that my mother and I can start a family here in Japan. I solicit your continued support. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Isuka.
続いては
Next is the elder sister of Mr. Sasaki Masakazu, Ms. Sasaki Michiko, and a member of the Family Association of Missing Persons, probably related to North Korea. Mr. Sasaki Masakazu went missing in 1987 when he was 37 years old in Omiya City, Saitama Prefecture, which today is Saitama City. Ms. Sasaki. Thank you. I am Sasaki Michiko, elder sister of Sasaki Masakazu, who disappeared at the end of November 1987 from Omiya City, Saitama Prefecture. I would like to thank everyone for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts and feeling about my brother. Our family moved from Akita Prefecture to Tokyo in 1955. My still infant brother and I were always together in the unfamiliar place. My little brother was patient and a very kind boy and was the treasure of our family. As we grew up, we started living separately. He was very poor but went to university. He was the poorest student struggling to support himself, but I'm sure he enjoyed his time going hiking in the mountains and going on trips. Around that time, he was thankfully diagnosed for an early-stage stomach cancer at the hospital where he was working as a student part-timer. After graduation, he worked as a teacher at the elementary and junior high schools in Saitama, but I guess he was dissatisfied with what he was doing, so he took other jobs such as private tutor and prep schools or cram schools. In the summer of 1987, he suddenly rejected me and strongly told me, "Never come here. I don't want to see you again." I was still worried about him, so I visited his house often, waited for his return in front of his room. 3 months later, at the end of November, my brother disappeared without a word. The room was neat. There was a mood of person who has lived there. He left his savings bank book, driver's license, cash and watch on his desk. Books, records and audio equipment, which I am not familiar, are still kept by myself. It has been 37 years since then, and I don't even know if they are usable items. Please come back soon and check them out yourself. Since Masakazu was on the older side of 37 years old when he went missing, I am having a hard time thinking that he might have committed suicide or might have been involved in an incident or accident. And I'm having a hard time thinking always for the worst. All of us who have family members gone missing have the same feelings. Many of those who are thought to have been abducted are younger, and even though they may have some uncertainty about their lives, they must have had dreams and hopes, and they must have been working and studying hard. They were all hardworking people who were living their lives looking forward in the future, and I just cannot believe that they would go missing on their own. It is heartbreaking when I think of the pain and frustration everyone is going through now. There were times when I was told that Masakazu might have been abducted as well, and all I could do is sit and wait back. But I learned about the existence of the Association for the Investigation of Specified Disappeared Persons, and I've been able to participate in the organization family member. There is only so much I can do as an individual, so I am grateful for the information and emotional support I receive. During my 60s, I was in and out of the hospital for some 8 years and lost confidence in my physical health, and I decided to take action while I can filed for the court adjudication of disappearance with the family court in June 2019, a procedure I had been pondering about for long. The court adjudicated his disappearance in May 2020. It is not that I have given up, but it seemed that the very fact that Masakazu existed would be eradicated if I pass away. That was unbearable. I wanted to make sure that the fact of the existence of Masakazu will be recorded. In August 2022, after COVID-19 disaster, I held a small funeral ceremony at the grave where my grandparents and parents are buried in Akita. A sweater was placed instead of his remains, and Masakazu's name was engraved on the headstone alongside his parents' name. My cousin arranged the tedious procedures of the funeral. I am truly sorry that my cousin, who continued to support us so much, passed away this March, and I am unable to give a good report. I can only express my gratitude. As soon as Masakazu comes back, I will immediately restore the family registration. Media reports say that in North Korea, economic sanctions are not functioning, and luxury cars from Germany, the US, or Japan are seen on the roads. But at the same time, there are pictures of people dying on the streets, and maybe that is a familiar scene or not. No one seems to try to help. In a world of tragedies such as wars where many get hurt and lose their lives, have the people of North Korea given up? I am sure that they have landed on Japan and they have abducted people from all over Japan, and they say that this issue is over. The abductees have not given up. I am not asking for anything special. We just want to lead a very ordinary life, like chatting and eating meals together with a family. That is all we are asking. I trust I will see him again. I need your support. Please. Thank you very much indeed. Ms. Sasaki, thank you very much.
続いては
Next, we will hear from Mr. James Sneden, brother of Mr. David Sneden. Mr. David Sneden went to China to study and went missing in August 2004 when he was traveling in Yunnan province. There is likelihood that he was abducted by North Korea. Mr. Sneden has sent us a video message. Enjoy.
Dear friends of the seemingly endless human rights cause, dear governmental leaders and responsible and curious individuals therein, but most especially, dear each and every deeply affected abductee family member and the downtrodden citizens of North Korea. Once again, I find myself before you asked to represent our heart-stricken family regarding our abducted brother, son, nephew, cousin, and friend, David Louis Sneden. This year marks the 20th year since his disappearance in Yunnan Province, China. Let's pause on that fact just for a moment. 20 years. I note respectfully there are other families we now call dear friends whose family member has been missing significantly longer, also held by the DPRK. So, 20 years. In all typical situations, we'd be celebrating a wonderful anniversary of some kind. But this milestone is very ignominious, and even sinister in its lack of attention and resolve, by multiple powers who could make a difference. That's 20 years a mother hasn't seen or spoken to her son. I would like every person within the sound of my voice, as you listen to my words, to consider yourself the father, mother, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, or dear friend of David Sneden, who's been missing since August 2004. Evidence clearly demonstrates he didn't die in Tiger Leaping Gorge, where trekking. Yet we are here still, 20 years later, speaking, pleading, wondering, praying, clinging to hope that somehow, someway, David will be released. In fact, the evidence significantly and sufficiently convinces the U.S. Congress, who passed a resolution, Senate Resolution 92, in November 2018. So I repeat, what has become of this resolution? It is now 6 years later, and our family hasn't heard a single smidget of information or had one single contact from a governmental individual or institution. I share excerpts of this resolution which indisputably verify and codify the case of David's abduction and requisite action committed therein. So I boldly ask, where are you, State Department? Where are you, intelligence community? Where are you, U.S. Congress? What do you know and are not sharing with our family? Why are we not able to read, despite applying under the Freedom of Information Act, multiple documents which state David's name and discuss his case? What are we not being told? So I ask any of you, again, consider within your heart that David is your son, brother, nephew, grandson, or dear friend, and resolve to act in your sphere of influence to bring truth and action to bear. Yes, somehow in all the tragedy and distraction of David's disappearance, we, David's family, not only cling to the belief and hope that David will be released to live a life freely with his family, but we equally hope and believe the beleaguered, humble people of North Korea will also be granted divinely intended freedoms and self-governance. Freedoms that ennoble all mankind, that embody all that is good, that drive innovation, economic prosperity, the arts, the sciences, and most importantly, that emancipates one's heart to worship in a manner of one's choosing, a loving Heavenly Father and Mother. We are a human family, all created with divine intent and potential. It is God's will that we, each one individually, reach our full potential and development through personal choice and agency. This simple but profoundly powerful, most basic of human rights is denied. No, it is literally expunged, vilified, and destroyed by the oppressive DPRK regime. So with that hope for David, we continue to cling to the hope for the people of the DPRK to be released from tyranny and granted this basic human tenet and right. Personally, one day I hope to visit with many of these oppressed people and enjoy some wonderful bibimbap and kimchi, or bulgogi and banchan, and see them flourishing in newfound freedom and posterity. Furthermore, I believe that my brother David, considering his pre-abduction Korean fluency due to serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, now, native with Korean's language and culture, would lovingly and patiently embrace the whole of that society, free to come and go with family and to family for the remainder of his days. In closing, I repeat my previous plea. Dear leaders of the DPRK, your citizens are your guiding light, your flowering plant, your daily sunrise on a new tomorrow for hope and posterity. Grant them the freedoms needed to improve all that is wonderful north of the 48th parallel. We are here when you choose to outreach a hand. 一言日本語を話させていただきたいと思います。拉致問題
Let me deliver a short comment in Japanese. To the families who have been affected by the abduction issue, this problem has not ended. I am determined to work hand in hand with you, with our hearts united. Let us continue to communicate and strive through our love until this comes to an end. Thank you. That was an appeal from Mr. James Sneden.
最後に
Last but not least is the nephew of Miss Anocha Panchoy, Mr. Banon Choy. Miss Anocha Panchoy went missing in Macau in 1978 and is believed to have been abducted by North Korea. He has kindly recorded this message. Hello, I am Banon Choy. I am the nephew of Anocha Panchoy. Anocha is from Sang Panchon, Chiang Mai province of Thailand, who was abducted by North Korea. This happened in 1978, and it was through a letter sent by a friend who went to work with her that my relatives learned of Anocha's disappearance from her workplace in Macau. At that time, all of us could only wait. We did not know who to call for help, and at that time, 46 years ago, it was difficult to go to search from the countryside, and we did not know who to contact. Then, on November the 1st, 2005, it was 7:30 in the evening. Sum Panchoy, my father and Aunt Anocha's brother, was watching the ITV evening news program when the news anchor said that a Thai woman named Anocha had been abducted by North Korea. My father and I looked at the picture of the woman on the left side of the TV screen. My father immediately said, "This is Anocha. She's in North Korea." So, my father and I discussed where we could go for advice, and finally we went to see the Sang Kyampé City Hall that we wanted to know the facts and inform the mayor about the situation. Later, media reporters visited our house. An official from the Thai Ministry of Foreign Affairs also came to us and questioned us. Afterwards, officials from the government invited us, and we were able to meet the foreign minister. We were called by the Japanese government and the National Association for the Rescue of Japanese Kidnapped by North Korea. And later, my father and I participated in an international conference in Japan in December 2005. My father and I went on several occasions to visit and write to successive Thai prime ministers to request their cooperation. We also met with representatives of many relevant government agencies, but the answer was always the same. We will do everything we can do. We will do everything. We will help and support you. The decade leading up to 2015 was a time which my father did the best he could as her brother. He struggled in every way in order to find his sister and bring her home safely. For the sake of his dear and beloved sister, he tried all he could to make her return home safely. However, on Friday, May the 1st, 2015, Scum, Anocho's brother, passed away peacefully without the opportunity to see his sister for the last time. Before he passed away, my father told me never to give up on Anocha Panoi, and that even if I could not go myself to search if she was alive, he told me that I must insist that she be brought back. That was my father's last wish. At that time, I promised my father that I will do everything I can, and I will never give up. It is 46 years since the day Anocha disappeared, and there has been no contact or cooperation from the Thai government. At this moment, the only people who can help us, my relatives, find Anocha is the Japanese government, National Association for the Rescue of Japanese Kidnapped by North Korea, the family members of the abductees, and human rights organizations. However, the current global economic situation is sluggish, affecting everyone in every country around the world, and everyone is facing difficulties. I and my families thought that no one in this world today would be able to commit to this matter, but today the symposium is being held, and that warms at the heart of all of us, relatives of those abducted by North Korea. So I think of it this way. There are still people who understand our feelings. There are still people who are committed beside myself, and we have not given up yet. So thanks to all of you here, all of us and all of our relatives who were abducted by North Korea can still have hope. I sincerely pray that I and all the families of the abductees will be able to see our abducted relatives as soon as possible. On behalf of my family, I would like to thank you all, including members of the media and the respective organizations that are here today. This was Mr. Banon Choy, his direct appeal. These were the direct voices, appeals of the families of the abducted and missing persons.
We now would like to proceed to the panel discussion. It will be moderated by Professor Nishino Junya of the Keio University, who is a researcher on East Asian international politics, contemporary politics of ROK and North Korea, and Japan-ROK relations, and has published articles on North Korea. Professor Nishino, please go ahead. Thank you for the kind introduction. My name is Nishino of Keio University. I'm happy to be here. Already we heard from the families there is time constraints, and the time constraints is becoming even harsher. And Russia's President Putin visited North Korea, and therefore things are moving in international affairs. And although there is more uncertainty over this issue, on the other hand, the Japanese government is striving to seek high-level consultations with Chairman Kim Jong-un. And under these circumstances, in order to solve the abduction issue, what kind of approach, what kind of efforts are necessary? We have with us international experts who are well-versed on these issues. We have two panelists. Let me introduce to you the two panelists. First of all, the first panelist is Mr. Evans Revere, former Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of State of the United States of America. At the State Department, he acted as the head of Korea and head of Japan, and he also was acting Assistant Secretary of East Asian and Pacific Affairs. He has long been involved in the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asian issues. Thank you for being here. The second panelist is Professor Lee Won-dong of Kookmin University of the Republic of Korea. Professor Lee is not only an authority of Japan in ROK, he is well versed with the Korean Peninsula issue and Northeast Asian issue. Thank you for being here. First, I would like to call upon Mr. Evans Revere to speak for approximately 5 minutes as initial remarks, and then I will give the floor to Professor Lee Won-dong. And then after that, we would like to proceed to a Q&A. Mr. Evans Revere, please go ahead.
Thank you. It is a special privilege for me to participate in this symposium. So let me begin by thanking the government of Japan, especially the Cabinet Secretariat of the headquarters for the abduction issue, for kindly inviting me to be here, and to the other hosts for making this very important event possible. I've had the honor of participating in this symposium previously, both at the United Nations in New York and in Tokyo. Each time it has been a solemn and moving occasion, but today's event is particularly so. So much time has passed, the abductees and their families have grown older, and we are still seeking a resolution of this shameful and inhumane action by North Korea that has scarred so many lives so deeply. Years ago, there was a time when we hoped things might finally be moving towards a resolution. Those hopes were sadly dashed. Today, the leadership in Pyongyang seems to have little interest in dealing with the pain and suffering their regime caused. Those of us who have spent decades working on North Korea are not surprised by the callousness of the regime towards the families of the abductees. After all, that's how the regime treats its own citizens. Time and again over the decades, the Pyongyang regime has been given a chance to go down a different, more humanitarian and more transparent path. But the DPRK has shown itself to be incapable of doing so. 26 years ago, I chaired the first US DPRK dialogue on terrorism. It was a meeting designed to inform Pyongyang what it needed to do to be removed from the US list of state sponsors of terrorism. At that meeting, my North Korean counterpart said that his country was tired of being treated like an international pariah and wanted to be seen as a normal country. I informed him what had to be done to achieve this goal, including ending Pyongyang's ties with groups advancing and advocating terror. But to the list of things that North Korea needed to do, I added one. I remarked that North Korea's isolation, its reputation for inhumanity, and its inability to become a normal member of the international community, none of these things would be resolved until the DPRK dealt with the abduction issue. My DPRK counterpart was not pleased to hear this, but he understood the price his country would pay if it did act as I suggested. 26 years later, North Korea is still isolated, impoverished, and not accepted as a normal country, because it isn't. Pyongyang's unwillingness to definitively deal with the abduction issue has a lot to do with this. Japan has urged Pyongyang to make progress on this important emotional issue. North Korea, emboldened by its new relationship with Russia, confident in its status as a nuclear weapons power, and protected from UN Security Council action by its Chinese and Russian partners, does not seem serious about accommodating Tokyo's concerns. Indeed, one might conclude that North Korea's only reason for dangling the possibility of dialogue with Japan is to see if a wedge might be driven between Japan, the United States, and South Korea. The DPRK has no path to international acceptance unless it denuclearizes, ceases to threaten its neighbors, adheres to international diplomatic norms, grants its people the dignity and human rights they deserve, and deals effectively with matters like the abduction issue. But North Korea believes it will gain the international community's acceptance of its status as a nuclear power. Pyongyang thinks it can dominate South Korea, undermine the US-ROK alliance, and drive wedges between the United States and its alliance partners, including Japan. The just concluded summit between Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un has only reinforced North Korea's belief that it is on a winning path. But underestimates the determination of Japan and its international partners. Today, it remains true that the resolution of the abduction issue would be in North Korea's interest. It would put the DPRK on a better and more helpful path. More than ever, that point needs to be driven home to Pyongyang in the hope that North Korea will, at long last, opt to do the right thing. It is equally important to remind North Korea that the aging of the abductees and their families in Japan means that time is of the essence. If Pyongyang wants to reap the benefits of better ties with Japan, the time to do so is now. Thank you.
Mr. Revere, thank you very much. In the second half, you mentioned that the present status of North Korea is to try to cause a wedge between Japan and the United States. On the other hand, despite their attempt to do so, from the viewpoint of immediately having to solve the abduction issue, we are making efforts. But later on, Mr. Revere, I will ask you what should be done in order to make North Korea understand that resolution of the abduction issue serves to their interest? What additional steps do we need to take? And you also mentioned that the families are aging, and we are with deep time constraints. In order to have North Korea understand that point, what kind of approach is necessary? You have actually experienced negotiating with North Korea, so those will be some of the points I will be asking you later. Now, I would like to call upon Professor Lee Won-duk, Professor of Kookmin University of the Republic of Korea. Professor, please go ahead. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Lee Won-duk. I am very thankful to the relevant parties for hosting this meaningful symposium. I am most honored to be able to participate as a panelist. I've been listening to the comments, and I sympathize with several of the points, and especially the appeal by the families of the abductees was heart-wrenching. Their true voices did have an impact, and I have deep empathy. I would like to stress key points. First of all, time is limited. Thus, expeditious resolution is necessary. As many have already mentioned, abduction is a universal human rights issue, and from the Japanese perspective, it is an issue of sovereignty. At the same time, the South-North divide, as well as the structure of confrontational politics in East Asia, are some of the root causes of this long challenge, which needs to be promptly resolved. For 25 years, Japanese abduction issue remains unresolved. And in ROK, we have detainees, we have abductees. We are faced with many issues, and there are prisoners of war from the Korean War days. 516 is the number of post-war abductees. So we in Korea face similar problems as Japan. There are many Koreans that are detained in North Korea. So, in principle, the antagony between North Korea and Japan has remained unresolved, and that has become one of the causes why abduction has remained resolved. And therefore, we must look at this problem from the overall structure of international politics. Second, I would like to mention a new approach to bring resolution to the abduction issue. From 2006, the Japanese government has been active through the establishment of the headquarters on the abduction issue within the government. The Japanese government has been injecting wisdom in pursuing various initiatives to resolve the issue. According to my investigation, the head of the headquarters is the Prime Minister or the Chief Cabinet Secretary. And a significant budget amount is earmarked, and many senior members of the government are affiliated. Korea envies Japan, and we respect Japan and its government for taking such initiatives. It is known that Japan upholds three principles. One, abduction is a serious and imminent issue. Second, Japan demands North Korea to return all abductees collectively based upon the assumption that they are all alive. And thirdly, Japan will begin negotiations for normalization after the resolution of the abduction issue. But let me try to think about whether this third principle is practicable or not. In other words, seek normalization of diplomatic relations after the abduction issue is resolved. I would like to suggest replacing this entrance approach to exit-oriented approach. In the case of the United States government, first under the Obama government in 2014, normalized its relations with Cuba and then began to solve these various issues. In other words, doing the normalization of diplomatic ties first could be an option. Demanding the return of all abductees whilst they are alive is, of course, a natural demand from the Japanese perspective. But is it a hurdle that North Korea can overcome? The bar might be too high. Japan is demanding the return of 17, but North Korea has said 8 have died and 4 have never entered into the country and 5 have been returned alive. Of course, Japan needs to demand the return of those who confirmed alive or those where there is likelihood for survival. But for those to whom North Korea has declared death, I wonder whether it's effective to demand the presentation of evidence or investigation, because so far those certificates or evidences have not been sufficiently based, and there had been discrepancies between what they present and what they say. So we believe that investigation and studying is necessary. Thirdly, what would be the key to resolution? Abduction is directly related to the North-South divide and the security and peace issue of Northeast Asia. The resolution of the abduction issue is also deeply linked with the Japan-DPRK relationship involving normalization of diplomatic ties and nuclear and missile issue. The origin of the abduction issue is caused by the regime of North Korea, and it's also connected to the inter-Korean divide, the hostility between Japan and North Korea, and the international relations of Northeast Asia. So maybe a bold action to change the confrontational structure in this region may be necessary. We might need a multi-dimensional approach, multi-dimensional formula for resolution. Between Japan and North Korea, the Prime Minister is attempting to engage in high-level consultations directly under the initiative of the Prime Minister. I hope that more efforts can be made to accelerate this process of establishing communication. That concludes my initial remarks. Professor Lee Yong-dok, thank you very much.
本当にありますように、
As you said at the outset, the Korean Yoon government also attaches importance to the human rights issue in North Korea. On the other hand, North Korea against ROK is taking even more hostile attitude vis-a-vis the Republic of Korea. And in this context, in order to cause progress in human rights issue in North Korea, including abduction, what do you think would be an effective approach for the ROK government to take, or for you to take personally? Those are some of the points for which I will seek your wisdom. Now we have slightly over 20 minutes to engage in the discussion with the two panelists. First of all, Mr. Evans Revere, I already gave you a heads up the question I wish to ask. We understand the tactics of North Korea, but in this context, in order to resolve this imminent issue of abduction, whilst we understand such tactics, what kind of approach would be effective? Would you like to respond to that question? Please go ahead.
Sure, thank you. That's a very good and very important question. It seems to me, and I suggested this in my remarks, that the core message that needs to be conveyed to the North Korean regime at all levels is the hopelessness of its future if it cannot accommodate the concerns of Japan and the international community on a range of issues, including this most important abductee issue. North Korea needs to understand very, very clearly that its desire to become a normal country in the international community is blocked forever if it does not accommodate these concerns and resolve these issues. So that's the bad news message to North Korea. There also, I think, needs to be a parallel good news message to North Korea that very specifically paints a picture of a future in which North Korea does become a normal member and contributing member of the international community. And I think North Korea needs to hear both of those messages. And if we are able to communicate those messages effectively at all levels, particularly to the leadership level in North Korea, I think the North Koreans will ultimately make the right and the rational choice. I'm reminded of the time I accompanied former Secretary of Defense William Perry to Pyongyang when we launched our effort to open up negotiations on the nuclear issue with them. There was, in the minds of many, no hope that dialogue was ever going to begin. But we went to Pyongyang, and the strategy, and I was in all of Bill Perry's meetings in Pyongyang, including with the nominal head of state there. And what we did with the North Koreans was exactly what I just suggested. It was to tell the North Koreans that there were two paths ahead. One of them was a path to a very bleak and dark future, and the other one was a path to a brighter future. And our core message was you ought to go down the brighter path because you really don't want to go down that dark path. So what I'm suggesting here is a variation on that approach, which got the North Koreans to the table. And against the predictions of many people, they actually came to the table. We were able to make some progress for a while late in the Clinton administration. So a variation on that, led by, of course, Japan, but strongly supported by the United States and the Australia, the international community, the EU, et cetera, I think is the way to go here. And to appeal specifically to Kim Jong-un, early in his tenure as leader, he made it clear that what he was seeking was a better lives for his people. Well, Japan and the international community have the ability to provide that better life for the North Korean people. So we ought to challenge the North Korean leader to take his country down that path to a better life and the brighter future that I suggested.
はい、リビアさんありがとうございました。北朝鮮の
Thank you very much, Mr. Revere. Looking at the reality of the status in North Korea and reading from the slogan asserted by the leader, how should they elevate the quality of life of the people? That should be a priority. We should be talking to the leader so that he directly gets that message. Thank you very much for the clear intervention. Next, Professor Lee, I asked you the question previously. The UN administration of ROK is focusing on the human rights issue in the north, but the inter-Korean relationship has become even more hostile. So, as the expert in ROK or on behalf of the ROK government, what kind of approach do you think is necessary in order to cause substantive change in the attitude of North Korea? What approach is being pursued by the ROK government? Thank you. First of all, as I said at the outset, from the perspective of ROK, abduction by North Korea is not someone else's problem. As I said, there are several South Koreans detained in North Korea, and during the war, many South Koreans were taken as prisoners of war who still remain detained. And 516 people, ROK government in post-war period, there have been 516 South Koreans abducted by North Korea on the East Coast and West Coast. They were fishing and abducted, or many students were swimming in the ocean and were abducted at the beach. And despite these facts, the ROK government has never confronted with the North Korean government and raised these issues. But with the birth of the Yoon administration, the government is now focusing on human rights, and they are prioritizing the resolution of the victims of abduction. So they begun to take approaches against these issues. The trilateral summit between Japan, US, and ROK issued a statement that touches upon that. In Phnom Penh, the joint statement was issued by the three countries, and the common will to resolve the abduction issue was confirmed. And in 2023, at the Camp David statement, the Japan, ROK, US leaders mentioned the abductees, detainees, and POWs, and they reaffirmed their common will, which was reflected in the statement. So, against Japan's abduction issue, ROK sympathizes, and we are trying to form a joint front line in order to tackle this issue together with the Japanese government. From the perspective of the ROK government and the people of ROK, Japan's abduction issue is something to which we can sympathize, and this kind of emotion has risen most recently. According to the Unification Ministry of ROK, they have established a task force to resolve this abduction issue. In 2006, the Japanese government established the headquarters of the abduction issue, which has a wide coverage within the government, but in the Unification Ministry, ROK has established a task force to tackle this issue. Then, specifically, in order to resolve this issue, what kind of approach is possible? I think the only way to resolve this issue is to look at this strategically. Just unilaterally imposing pressure to North Korea may not lead to resolution. For more than 20 years, we have tried to resolve this issue in such a way with no progress. So a more strategic approach may be necessary in a different way. So, along with pressure, the Japanese government's attitude may change. So both pressure and dialogue should be pursued. More flexibly entice the change of attitude within North Korean government. Maybe that's a point that we should consider seriously. And we can use the card of normalization of Japan-DPRK relationship. So by imposing strategic approach vis-a-vis North Korea, Japan and South Korea can collaborate and based upon Japan-US ROK partnership, strategically use both the pressure card and the dialogue card in parallel. And I think that is the more practical approach.
Thank you very much, Professor Lee Won-dok. What you mentioned at the end of your comment, Japan Republic of Korea cooperation, and about the cooperation, I would like to ask you to elaborate later on. Then, at the beginning of the session, as was mentioned, President Putin of Russia visited North Korea, and North Korea is becoming ever more hostile against South Korea. Under this backdrop, back in 2021, at the 8th Workers' Party Congress, the so-called 5-year plan to reinforce the military power was adopted, and the dialogue with the U.S. will be entirely refused and rejected. So the international situation has become even more difficult. Under this situation, the government of Japan is trying to promote a high-level consultation directly supervised by the Prime Minister, and this has been mentioned for several times. Against this government of Japan's position, sometimes North Korea shows a positive posture, and sometimes they change into a negative reaction, and they are fluctuating. Regarding this situation, for North Korea to be induced to come to the table to talk with Japan, what approaches might be necessary in light of today's international situation in the global community structure? I would like to ask Mr. Revere for your views. At the same time, if possible, as is widely discussed, in November, there is the U.S. presidential election, and North Korea is deeply interested. And maybe after that, they might become positive vis-a-vis the U.S. relationship and diplomacy. So maybe if you have any view about North Korea's reaction in diplomacy with U.S., if you have any outlook, please, I ask for your insight, please.
Sure. Well, let me start with the second point first. I don't want to get into domestic U.S. politics here, but we have one candidate in the race aspiring to be president again, if he can, who have some interesting experience with North Korea, and I'm of that school of North Korea expert that feels that that was not managed well. It was not handled very well by the previous administration. It made a number of unilateral and dangerous concessions to North Korea, and the net outcome of it was the total failure of the negotiation. I've always been an advocate of high-level engagement with North Korea, but high-level engagement based on, as we like to say in the United States, doing your homework and preparing well. And that summit in Singapore and the Hanoi summit were not prepared very well. And some major mistakes were made, and the result was, in the end, as I and others predicted, failure. I think North Korea has its favorite candidate in this election in November, and that candidate is probably not Joe Biden. But the reason that North Korea favors the other party, I think, is because I think they regard him as someone that they may be able to take advantage of. I'm being very frank with you. But to the other question that you posed, I think it's important that the current efforts that Japan is making and the support that the international community is providing Japan, it's important to continue that. And it's important to continue to have a quiet dialogue with North Korea. And let me explain why. To the extent that this laundry is aired out in public, I think it becomes potentially embarrassing for all parties, particularly North Korea. I don't usually talk about this very much, but since leaving the State Department, I've been involved in very quiet conversations with the North Koreans to bring home Americans who had been arrested and charged with espionage and other crimes in North Korea. And of the 6 cases I worked on, every one of those Americans ultimately came home. Americans and Korean Americans came home. And one of the most important things was this quiet dialogue and the reinforcement of the point to the North Koreans in these quiet conversations about the darkness of North Korea's future if it continued to go down that path of arresting people on trumped-up charges and false charges. And so I'm an advocate of quiet diplomacy. I'm also an advocate of high-level diplomacy when the appropriate preparations are made. And so we'll see what happens in the future in terms of our elections. But I think the current administration is doing a solid and fine job. And I think ultimately the North Koreans will come back to the table. But I don't think if Joe Biden is the re-elected president, that he will make the mistakes that Donald Trump made in Singapore and in Hanoi.
リビアさんありがとうございました。ご経験に基づ
Thank you very much, Mr. Revere. Based upon your experience, you have shared with us your insightful thoughts. Sending message that will reach the leadership, high-level dialogue, they are necessary, but at the same time, we need to be well prepared, and a serene environment is also necessary. Thank you very much for those comments that are based upon your true experience. Next, Professor Lee. Towards the end of your comment, you said Japan, US, Korea, and Japan-Korea collaboration. I talked about the extremely complicated and difficult international affairs. What should be specifically done in order to solve this issue? If you could share with us your further thoughts on this issue. At the moment, in order to solve the North Korean issue, if I look at the environment, I have to become very pessimistic. There was the President Putin's visit, and Russia-North Korea relationship is tighter. And after the visit by President Yoon to the United States, North Korea says that South Korea is an enemy. And there is the competitive strategic competition between US and China. So we are in a very harsh environment as we strive to resolve the North Korean issue. And in this context, even as the United States and China are considered as enemies by North Korea is hinting on considering Japan differently, and we could qualify this as an opportunity. Of course, Japan, US, and ROK collaboration, or Japan ROK collaboration, of course, there is likelihood that they are trying to cause a wedge in the trilateral or bilateral relationship. But the route that could change North Korea's attitude is only through Japan-North Korea channel at the moment. So I hope Prime Minister Kishida will accelerate his approach to North Korea, and support needs to be provided to the Prime Minister, especially if the dialogue between Japan and North Korea is done in the trilateral collaboration. We think that there could be early harvest of some fruit. And as Mr. Revere said, in order to persuade North Korea, top-down negotiations may be effective. So summit or senior officials meeting at high level, maybe those opportunities can entice change in the attitude of North Korea. Rather than bottom-up, top-down may be effective because of the decision-making process in North Korea. So a summit meeting at the leaders level may be the most effective channel, and Prime Minister Kishida may have more room for maneuver, although that room or space may be small. And the United States and ROK must support such efforts by Prime Minister Kishida and his administration, and such support is very important.
Thank you very much. We have heard from the two experts. There is a time limit. We have no time to lose, and how to quickly resolve. We have heard very important insights and advices.
In addition to the time constraints, the international affairs surrounding North Korea is becoming ever more complex. And from the perspective of nature of the North Korean political regime, active approach to the leader and preparation and quiet environment and Japan ROK, Japan-US ROK cooperation is necessary. Thank you for giving us those diverse suggestions. Again, I would like to thank both panelists. We truly hope that we can continue to discuss this issue, and we can continue to invite the interest towards this issue. With this, I would like to close this session and hand back the microphone to the MC. Thank you again to the two panelists.
Mr. Riviere, Professor Yi, Professor Nishino, thank you very much indeed. As we conclude the symposium, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Yamazaki Kazuyuki, Permanent Representative of Japan to the United Nations, will deliver the closing remarks. Ambassador Yamazaki.
Distinguished representatives, speakers, and panelists, and participants, thank you very much for the rich and productive input and discussion today. Your engagement has been very valuable. I express my profound appreciation to the esteemed permanent representatives of the United States, Australia, the Republic of Korea, and the European Union for their strong and unequivocal messages of support. Their statements reflect the broad commitment of the international community to resolving the abduction issues. This collective voice underscores our shared determination to seek the immediate return of all abductees. Today, we had the poignant opportunity to listen to the voices of the families of Japan, the United States, and Thailand. Their testimonies have manifested the immense suffering and enduring pain they have experienced over many years. These stories remind us of the urgent need for resolution. I also extend my deepest gratitude to the esteemed panelists for sharing their profound and insightful perspectives. Their expertise is vital to advancing our understanding and strategy. In conclusion, I reaffirm Japan's unwavering dedication to exerting every effort toward the immediate resolution of the abduction issue. I trust everyone present today will join forces and work collaboratively toward the goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Yamazaki. This concludes the United Nations Online Symposium on the Abduction issue. Thank you very much for your attention over the long discussion till the end of the program.